Emily Carter still remembered the exact sound of the front door closing that morning. It was soft, almost careless, like her husband expected to return within hours. Daniel stood by the hallway mirror adjusting his cufflinks, speaking quickly about a sudden work emergency that couldn't wait. He avoided her eyes, kissed her cheek without warmth, and promised to call soon. Emily watched him leave with an unease she couldn't explain, unaware that this ordinary moment would become the line dividing her life into before and after. Hours passed. Then the evening. His phone rang unanswered. By midnight, worry crept into her chest like a slow, tightening knot. Daniel had never ignored her calls before, not like this. The following day brought only silence. His office claimed he was on leave. Friends hadn't heard from him. Panic replaced patience. On the third day, Emily tried calling Margaret, her mother-in-law, hoping she might know something. The call went straight to voicemail. Again and again. Margaret, who never missed a call, had vanished too. That was when fear turned into something darker. Two people disappearing at the same time wasn't coincidence. By the end of the week, Emily barely slept. The house felt hollow, every room echoing with unanswered questions. She replayed their last conversations, searching for missed signs, hidden truths, anything that explained how her husband could simply erase himself from her life. Somewhere deep inside, a terrifying thought formed: Daniel hadn't disappeared. He had chosen to leave. And whatever waited at the end of that choice was something she was never meant to see. Looking back, Emily realized the warnings had always been there. She had just learned to ignore them. From the beginning of her marriage, Margaret Carter had never truly welcomed her. Her smiles were polite but hollow, her compliments carefully worded, always followed by advice that felt more like correction. Margaret knew what was best for Daniel, and in her mind, Emily was simply someone passing through his life, not someone meant to stay. Daniel, for his part, rarely defended his wife. Whenever Emily felt uncomfortable or disrespected, he urged her to be patient, or claimed his mother didn't mean it that way. Slowly, Emily learned to swallow her feelings to keep the peace. Holidays were planned around Margaret's preferences. Financial decisions were discussed with his mother before his wife. Even private disagreements somehow made their way back to Margaret, as if there were no boundaries left in Emily's own marriage. There were moments Emily should have questioned more deeply. Daniel often took phone calls in another room when his mother called. He changed plans suddenly after speaking to her. And when Emily once joked that sometimes it felt like she was married to both of them, Daniel didn't laugh. He simply looked away. Now, sitting alone in the silence of their house, those memories returned with painful clarity. The distance she once dismissed as stress or habit now felt deliberate. Margaret hadn't just influenced Daniel, she had shaped him, controlled him, and slowly pushed Emily to the margins of her own marriage. As fear twisted into suspicion, Emily began to understand something chilling. Whatever had happened during this past week didn't start suddenly. It had been building quietly for years, right in front of her eyes. By the seventh night, exhaustion had blurred Emily's sense of time. Sleep came in fragments, broken by unanswered calls and racing thoughts. The house felt heavier after dark, as if the walls themselves were holding secrets she wasn't ready to face. Restless and unable to breathe through the silence, she reached for her phone, scrolling without purpose, searching for distraction more than answers. That was when she saw Margaret's name. The post appeared suddenly on her screen, bright and celebratory, painfully out of place against the emptiness of Emily's week. A smiling photo filled the display: flowers, champagne glasses, soft golden light. Below it were the words that made her stomach drop. "Congratulations on your wedding, my son." For a moment, Emily thought she was misreading it. Her fingers trembled as she refreshed the page. The post remained. The date was today. Her heart pounded violently as confusion turned into horror. Wedding? Daniel was already married. To her. A wave of nausea washed over her as she zoomed in on the image, scanning every detail. A woman's hand rested beside Daniel's, manicured and unfamiliar. A ring gleamed under the light. Faces she had never seen smiled in the background, celebrating a moment she was never meant to witness. Tears blurred Emily's vision, but she couldn't look away. The truth pressed down on her chest with crushing force. Daniel hadn't vanished. He hadn't been in danger. He had been building a new life while she sat alone, worrying if he was even alive. In that instant, something inside Emily broke, then hardened. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it, a cold realization settled in. This wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. The shock of the post did not fade with sleep. It sharpened. By morning, Emily's grief had transformed into a steady, focused resolve. Crying would not give her answers. Silence would not protect her anymore. If Daniel and Margaret had worked this hard to hide the truth, then the truth was something worth uncovering. She began with what little she had. Bank notifications Daniel had forgotten to disable. A shared email account he never thought she would open. Flight confirmations buried beneath harmless-looking messages. The evidence came together slowly, each discovery cutting deeper than the last. One-way tickets. A foreign destination. Hotel bookings timed perfectly with the date on Margaret's post. Emily contacted mutual friends, choosing her words carefully. Some knew more than they admitted. Others avoided her calls entirely. But one detail became clear: Daniel hadn't told anyone he was married anymore. To the outside world, Emily simply didn't exist. When the digital trail reached its limit, Emily took the step she never imagined she would need. She hired a private investigator. Within days, confirmations arrived. Daniel and Margaret had traveled together, attended legal appointments, and arranged documents abroad. Nothing about this had been impulsive. Every move was calculated. As Emily stared at the growing pile of evidence spread across her dining table, the truth settled heavily in her chest. This betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was logistical, financial, and deliberate. The people she trusted most hadn't just lied to her, they had rewritten reality itself. And now that she could see the pattern clearly, Emily knew one thing for certain. She would not disappear quietly the way they planned. The next piece of the puzzle was the hardest to face. Through a combination of flight records, social media breadcrumbs, and discreet inquiries, Emily discovered the shocking truth: Daniel hadn't simply disappeared, he had married another woman. A young socialite named Sophia Reynolds, radiant and polished, had become the center of the life Daniel and Margaret had carefully orchestrated behind her back. Emily's mind reeled as she pieced together the ceremony details. It had been small but lavish, held in a boutique overseas chapel, with champagne, flowers, and a photographer to capture every angle. Margaret's involvement had been total. She arranged flights, hotel bookings, and even coordinated legal documents to ensure everything was seamless. It was as if Emily had never existed, as if her years of marriage and trust could be erased with a single well-planned act. The betrayal wasn't only emotional, it was calculated. Every interaction Daniel had had with Emily over the past weeks was a lie, every excuse a mask. And Sophia, she had been aware of this arrangement, smiling in photos where Emily's absence was a deliberate statement. The realization stung like fire: Emily wasn't just abandoned. She had been strategically removed from a life she thought was hers. As she absorbed the full weight of the deception, Emily's grief transformed into something fiercer. She would not let this injustice stand. Understanding the depth of Margaret's control and Daniel's complicity, Emily began plotting her next move. This wasn't just about confronting them, it was about reclaiming her life. The confrontation came not on Emily's terms, but Daniel's. He called late one evening, his tone calm, almost rehearsed, as if he expected her to fall into line and forgive the unthinkable. Emily, still reeling from the discovery of Sophia and the wedding post, answered with a mixture of fury and icy control. Daniel tried to explain. He spoke of new beginnings, unavoidable circumstances, and Margaret's guidance, as though any of it justified a week of disappearance or the hidden marriage. His words dripped with entitlement. He offered no apology, no acknowledgement of the fear and panic he caused. Margaret's influence was clear: his loyalty to her outweighed his vows, his promises, and his love. Emily's anger flared, but it was tempered by a sharp clarity. She didn't need to plead, beg, or argue. She demanded truth, details about the wedding, the finances, and the elaborate plan they had executed. Daniel faltered slightly, but pride kept him standing. Margaret's orchestration had made him confident, but Emily's resolve was unshakable. By the end of the call, Emily realized something important. Confrontation didn't have to be about forgiveness. It could be about reclaiming power, asserting boundaries, and making it clear that their betrayal would not define her. She hung up, heart racing, but stronger than she had been in weeks. For the first time, she understood that the life they tried to steal could not belong to them anymore. After the confrontation, Emily knew the fight wasn't over, but this time, she would fight on her terms. She began taking concrete steps to reclaim her life. First, she consulted a lawyer to understand her rights, both marital and financial. Every document, every transaction, every contract that Daniel and Margaret had manipulated became a tool for her strategy. She wasn't going to be invisible anymore. Emily also started building her emotional strength. She returned to hobbies she had abandoned, reconnected with supportive friends, and sought counseling to process the deep sense of betrayal. Each step reminded her that her worth wasn't defined by Daniel or his mother, and their betrayal was a reflection of their character, not hers. Determined, she even considered public exposure, not for revenge, but to ensure transparency. If Margaret and Daniel believed they could erase her, Emily would make their deception undeniable. With every calculated move, she felt her confidence grow. The woman who had spent years accommodating another's control was no longer hiding in the shadows. She was taking back her life, piece by piece, stronger and more self-assured than ever. By the end of this chapter, Emily wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Her pain had transformed into empowerment, and she realized that the real victory wasn't punishment, it was reclaiming her identity and her future. Months had passed since Emily uncovered the truth and confronted Daniel. The house that once echoed with silence now felt like a space of renewal. Emily had moved into a new apartment closer to her friends and workplace, a place she chose entirely for herself. The weight of betrayal still lingered, but it no longer defined her. Daniel and Margaret faded from her daily thoughts. News from mutual acquaintances confirmed that their carefully orchestrated life abroad had begun to unravel. Sophia, the secret bride, struggled to maintain her presence in Daniel's world as Emily's clarity and courage became the quiet benchmark of integrity. Though Emily did not gloat or seek revenge, her mere existence, strong, independent, and thriving, was the ultimate consequence they never anticipated. Emily immersed herself in work, hobbies, and social life. She traveled, learned new skills, and reconnected with passions that had been long suppressed. Friends admired her resilience, strangers were inspired by her story, and Emily finally felt a sense of freedom she had never known. In the end, the betrayal that had once seemed like the end of everything became the catalyst for her rebirth. Emily had turned heartbreak into empowerment, pain into purpose, and loss into self-discovery. Life, she realized, was not about the people who leave, it was about how you rise after they do. The chapter closes with Emily smiling at a city skyline from her new apartment balcony, the dawn breaking over a horizon full of possibility, symbolizing hope, strength, and the unshakable truth that she is in control of her own destiny.